Before sunrise, the city of Dallas was waking up to an ordinary morning. Cars filled the interstate, families prepared for their day. But inside one federal facility, everything was about to change. Within minutes, bullets would pierce glass, strike a transport van and leave one detainee dead, two others clinging to life. The gunman was a 29-year-old man named Joshua Yawn. And his attack would send shockwaves across Texas and beyond. Federal officials promised that no resource would be spared to find answers and hold those responsible. In Dallas, tragedy struck when a gunman opened fire at an ICE detention center. One detainee was killed, two others critically injured, after shots came from a rooftop overlooking the facility. Authorities confirmed the shooter aimed both at the building and at a transport van carrying detainees. The suspect, 29-year-old Joshua Yawn, took his own life as agents closed in on him. Neighbors described waking up to the sound of gunfire, as many as 30 shots echoing through the early morning. Shock quickly followed when they learned the violence was happening so close to home. Investigators wasted no time, searching two properties tied to Yawn, one in Collin County, Texas, the other in Durant, Oklahoma. Neighbors there expressed disbelief, describing the family as quiet, never expecting something like this to unfold next door. Homeland Security confirmed security would now be heightened at all ICE facilities nationwide. At the Dallas site, damage told its own story. Bullet holes pierced windows and even a framed American flag inside was struck. The shooting happened just after 6:30 in the morning, as an unmarked van entered the Sally Port at the back of the detention center. Yawn fired from the roof of a nearby building, hitting 3 detainees. One died at the scene, 2 were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. People inside the center recalled being evacuated to safer areas as the shots tore through glass and walls. Traffic along I-35 was shut down as federal and local officers swarmed the area. The FBI later called the case an act of targeted violence. Shell casings left behind carried messages that investigators described as anti-ICE in nature. Still, officials did not release a clear motive, and updates after the morning press conference came only through brief statements. Federal agents continued searching the Fairview home connected to Yawn, carrying out boxes of possible evidence. Records show Yawn had no violent history, though he was once arrested in 2015 for marijuana possession. He had also attended Collin College off and on between 2013 and 2018, with several gaps in his education. At one point in 2017 he worked in Washington state harvesting marijuana on a farm while living out of his car. Back in Dallas, the Mexican consulate confirmed one of the injured survivors was a Mexican national. Their officials condemned the attack, demanded a full investigation, and worked to provide support to the victim's family. By nightfall, investigators still searched for clarity. Joshua Yawn was dead, but the marks of his attack, bullet holes, fear, unanswered questions, remained across Dallas. Law enforcement quickly moved in. Dallas police, federal agents, and SWAT units closed off the area. Traffic along I-35 ground to a halt. Helicopters circled overhead. On the rooftop of an immigration law office across from the ICE center, they spotted him. Joshua Yawn. Armed. Still firing. As agents approached, the shooting stopped. Within minutes, Yawn turned the gun on himself. By the time officers reached him, the attack was over. The gunman was dead. But the questions were only beginning. News spread quickly across neighborhoods tied to Yawn. In Collin County, federal investigators poured into a quiet cul-de-sac in Fairview. They carried boxes out of a family home, leaving neighbors stunned. Sloan Mordecai, who lived nearby, recalled pulling into her street only to find reporters and FBI agents filling the block. She described the family as kind, never expecting something like this to come from their home. In Durant, Oklahoma, another property connected to Yawn was searched. SWAT officers and FBI agents combed the address, though officials never said what they recovered. For residents, the thought was the same: how could someone so close to home end up in headlines like these? Homeland Security released photos that revealed the aftermath. Windows spidered with bullet holes. Walls cracked. Even a framed American flag pierced by gunfire. Each image told the story of how far the shots traveled, how dangerously close they came to those inside. Federal officials confirmed what the evidence showed. Yawn's gunfire swept the length of the building, striking the Sally Port where detainees are transferred. This was not random. He had positioned himself where he could see the most vulnerable points. From the very first press conference, investigators revealed a disturbing clue. The shell casings left near Yawn's body carried etched messages. Each one, authorities said, contained words against ICE. It was the only real window into his motive. But even that left more questions. Was this personal anger? A broader statement? Or simply the actions of a troubled man? Officials labeled the case an act of targeted violence. But without a manifesto or a clear trail, the motive remained a mystery. Who was Joshua Yawn? Records showed little history of violence. Just one arrest in 2015 for marijuana possession in Collin County. He attended Collin College off and on between 2013 and 2018. His education was scattered, with gaps that no one could quite explain. In 2017, Yawn drove to Washington State where he worked on a marijuana farm. His employer later recalled he was living out of his car, working long hours for minimum wage without clear direction. It painted the picture of a young man drifting, disconnected, and without a steady path. Yet none of it explained why he would take aim at a federal building in Dallas years later. The tragedy extended beyond the shooter. 3 detainees had been hit. 1 was dead. 2 were fighting for their lives. The Mexican consulate in Dallas confirmed that one of the survivors was a Mexican national. Their officials moved quickly, reaching out to the family, providing legal help, and demanding full access to visit the victim in the hospital. They also condemned the shooting, calling it a terrible act of violence and pressing for a full investigation. For families with loved ones inside the facility, the fear was overwhelming. Phone calls flooded the consulate as people begged for information, desperate to know if it was their relative who had been shot. By nightfall, Dallas was still reeling. Police had not released the names of the victims. Federal investigators had not shared what, if anything, they found in Yawn's homes. The motive remained unclear, the investigation just beginning. What they did know was this. One man, positioned on a rooftop, had carried out a deadly act against an ICE facility. He left behind bullet holes, grieving families, and more questions than answers. And while Joshua Yawn was dead, the shadows of his actions stretched far beyond that Dallas morning. As night fell, the parking lot of the detention center was still swarming with flashing lights. Crime scene tape fluttered in the warm Texas air. For many who drove past on the freeway that evening, the facility looked like the epicenter of a disaster movie. But this was no film set. Dozens of local and federal agencies were working together, combing through every inch of evidence. Dallas Police Department, Homeland Security, the FBI, and ICE investigators each had their role. Evidence markers lined the asphalt where shell casings had landed. Photographers documented every shattered window and bullet hole. The atmosphere was tense. Officials refused to confirm details, leaving reporters to piece together fragments from sources. Who exactly were the victims? How many rounds had been fired? And what, if anything, tied Joshua Yawn directly to this facility? Law enforcement leaders promised answers in the days ahead, but for now, they only confirmed what everyone already knew. This was a deliberate attack. Joshua Yawn had left behind no note, no message, no social media video explaining his actions. Unlike other attackers whose motives are revealed in manifestos or live streams, Yawn's silence was deafening. Investigators turned to the small things. His last known movements. His car. His electronics. His phone records. Every device he owned was seized. Forensic teams dug through hard drives, memory cards, and even cloud accounts. They were searching for a clue, a phrase, anything that could explain why a 29-year-old man with no violent criminal history would choose to pick up a gun and open fire on an ICE van full of detainees. But in those first 48 hours, nothing came to the surface. Only speculation. In hospitals across Dallas, 2 families kept vigil by the bedsides of their loved ones. Both survivors of the shooting were in critical condition. Surgeons worked tirelessly to remove bullets, repair shattered bones, and stop internal bleeding. One family described the moment they received the phone call. It was early and they were just sitting down for breakfast. The voice on the other end told them their son had been shot on American soil, while in the custody of immigration officials. For them, the story was no longer about a gunman or a detention center. It was about survival. Every beep of the hospital monitor, every movement in the intensive care unit, was another reminder of how fragile life had become. Across Dallas, news crews set up camp outside the facility. Satellite trucks lined the streets, reporters went live every hour, and headlines carried Joshua Yawn's name across the nation. Yet, despite the attention, so little was known about him. Neighbors described him as quiet. Employers remembered him as someone who worked long hours but kept to himself. No one could point to a moment when he suddenly shifted. No one could recall words of hate or threats made in anger. And that mystery fueled the coverage. Who was Joshua Yawn? Why this place? Why this day? In the following days, fear spread to other detention centers. Was this a one-time act of violence, or could others be planning similar attacks? Security was tightened. Vehicles entering facilities were searched with greater detail. Armed guards patrolled rooftops. Visitors faced stricter checks. For detainees already living in uncertainty, the attack deepened their anxiety. For staff, it became a reminder that their workplace could become a target in an instant. The sound of gunfire had ended with Yawn's suicide, but the impact of that morning continued to ripple outward, through neighborhoods, through agencies, and through families caught in the crossfire. In Oklahoma, investigators carried out their second search of a property linked to Yawn. SWAT trucks rolled down a quiet street, leaving residents peering from behind curtains. What were agents looking for? One neighbor recalled watching men in tactical gear move quickly into the house, then out again carrying bags and boxes. To this day, officials have never confirmed what was seized. But those searches showed one thing: the government believed there might be more to the story. Each piece of evidence collected was another attempt to understand a puzzle that still didn't fit together. A young man with no record of violence, no clear history of extremism, and no public statements of anger, yet he had carried out a deadly attack. For the people of Dallas, the memory of that morning lingered. Every driver who sat stuck on I-35 that day remembered the fear of not knowing what was happening. Every family who had someone inside that building replayed the moment they saw their phone light up with messages and news alerts. Some described the night after the shooting as sleepless. Helicopters circled overhead long after the gunfire ended. Sirens wailed. Streets were blocked. Even as life returned to normal, a sense of unease remained. The ICE facility that once blended into the background of the city was now a place everyone recognized. A place marked by gunfire. Days turned into weeks, but the picture never became clear. Joshua Yawn remained an enigma. Investigators scoured his past, interviewed neighbors, and traced his steps, yet no manifesto surfaced, no explanation emerged. All they had were fragments. A young man who once studied at Collin College, drifting in and out of courses. A worker who traveled to Washington to earn a living on a marijuana farm. A quiet neighbor whose family was described as kind and ordinary. And then, this sudden act of violence. The ICE facility still bears the scars of that morning. Windows repaired, walls patched, but the memory remains. Every bullet hole tells a story of fear, of chaos, of lives changed in seconds. Inside hospitals, families waited for recovery, hoping their loved ones would not become another name on the list of the dead. For those who survived, the trauma did not end when the gunfire stopped. For the families who lost someone, the wound never truly healed. And for investigators, the case left behind more questions than answers. Why did he do it? Why that place? Why that day? Joshua Yawn took those answers with him. His death left only silence where an explanation should have been. And perhaps that is the most haunting part of all. Because in the end, there is no note to analyze, no clear motive to dissect, no final words to explain the choices that shattered a quiet Dallas morning. What remains is a story frozen in time. A van ambushed. A rooftop shooter. A community in shock. And a city still trying to make sense of a man who left no trace of his reasoning. Only devastation in his wake. This is the story of Joshua Yawn. The gunman who attacked, who killed, and who left behind questions that may never be answered. You've just followed a case that shook many people, and there are countless more stories waiting to be told. If this video kept you watching, make sure to hit the like button. It lets us know you want more. Don't forget to share this video with friends who follow true crime, because awareness matters. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Tap that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because we'll keep posting more true crime videos, more investigations, and more real events that deserve attention. This channel grows with your support, and together we can keep uncovering the stories that need to be heard. So like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next true crime story.
Welcome to the Case File. Here, every crime has a story, every mystery leaves a trail, and every detail could be the difference between truth and deception. From assassinations that shook the nation, to manhunts that gripped entire cities, we uncover the raw, unfiltered events behind the headlines. These are not just stories. They are lives, choices, and consequences. The files are open, the cases are real, and the truth is waiting to be found. This is the Case File. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next case might be the one that changes everything.